I'd like to say a little bit something about an approach to doing research, either from a business perspective or from an academic perspective, that is highly effective at aligning the interests of both managers and researchers at universities or universities of applied sciences. The research approach is called design science research. This is an approach to doing research which, for the majority of my time in academia, I was not aware of. And it was only about 3 or 4 years ago, at the invitation of some colleagues in the information systems department at my business school, to come and teach on their research methods course, that I became introduced to design science research. I'll forever be grateful to my colleagues for giving me this opportunity to get exposed to design science research and its associated approach to aligning practice and academia in collaborative research projects. Design science research has its origins in information systems, but looking at contemporary research papers, you can increasingly see that diverse fields are starting to take an interest in the approach, including in those studies seeking to understand entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial problems, but also studies of transitions like the digital transformation transition. The reason for this is that design science research seeks to solve specific problems. This problem-oriented approach is, of course, highly attractive to managers. I must say also to business practitioners completing higher degrees like a Doctorate of Business Administration also are very interested when they hear about design science research, because it very much speaks to them in their academic projects which they have to complete for these higher degrees, but at the same time allows them to leverage their expertise at solving concrete business problems. So what exactly is this design science approach to doing research? Well, the easiest way to describe it is that design science research projects effectively have 3 cycles that a project goes through. And these cycles are not organized in a linear fashion. They can repeat, they can be recursive, but there are 3 of them. The first is a relevance cycle, and in the more academically driven projects, this relevance cycle often makes use or takes advantage of previous academic research papers to build a knowledge base in terms of best practice and best thinking about a problem that the project is focusing on. Then there is a design cycle, and the design cycle is intended to create an artifact, which is a complicated way of saying creating a solution to the problem that a project is trying to solve. The really fascinating thing is that this artifact doesn't actually have to be a physical object. It can be a plan, it could be a process that you plan or describe, it could be a conceptual model of the problem to help you better understand it, but it can also be extremely practical in terms of a technical solution or an implementable business process, which then can solve the problem in practice. This artifact, in fact, is the very heart of design science research, and the ability to adapt the nature of the artifact to the specific purposes of the project is one of the strengths of design science research. Finally, there's the relevance cycle, and in the relevance cycle, we're very much focused, in the case of research with managers, other practitioners in business, on exactly what the problem is that they're facing or the challenges that they're facing that they need a solution to, and ensuring actively through the way that we approach these projects that we integrate those needs into the design of the project. Okay, so we have these 3 cycles. We have a rigor cycle, a design cycle, and we have a relevance cycle. But what does this mean in practice? Well, the easiest way to think about how a design science project unfolds is in 5 phases. The first phase is the awareness phase. And the awareness phase is very much aligned with a rigor cycle. In the awareness phase, we would typically draw on academic literature or other sources of established expert knowledge related to the problem that we're studying. And we would make sure that we review that knowledge base and that we understand what the accepted approaches to solving the problem are, which may or may not be working for us in our particular project. But we also want to make sure we understand the problem in such a way that it's relevant to the concrete context and business people that we are working with. And how do we do that? Well, we go and speak to them. We do interviews, or we have informal conversations. We try and understand how the people who actually have to deal with the problem on a day-to-day basis make sense of what's going on and where the real pain points for them actually lie. And then we compare that input out of business practice with what we already know in the academic literature or other forms of knowledge bases about the activities that we're trying to work on. And we come to a final shared understanding of exactly what the problem is that needs to be addressed. And out of this, we can then set up a clear specification of requirements for the solution that needs to be developed. These requirements then form the basis of and are the outcome of the second phase of the project, this alignment phase of the relevance and rigor cycles at the start of the project, namely the suggestion phase of a design science project. Once we have a proposal in the suggestion phase for how to solve the problem, and we have a requirement specification for exactly what needs to be done through that solution, we can move on into the artifact development phase. This is where we actually solve the problem. We create a solution to the problem that we could actually implement. As I said, this can take a variety of forms, and that's kind of dependent on the specifics of the problem that we're approaching. Once we have a solution that we can implement, ideally we would actually do that. We would implement it in practice, let the solution solve the problem, and then we go into the next phase, which is the evaluation phase. Of course, then we want to evaluate how well our proposed solution is solving the problem. This allows us to then look for opportunities for improving the solution that was developed. And potentially we might cycle back to the start of the project and return to the knowledge base or go and seek further expert input to then iteratively develop that solution. Indeed, this is one of the strengths of design science research. It has an iterative nature to it. You do not complete the project necessarily in a linear manner, but you always have the opportunity to return to an earlier phase in the project, subject to budget and time constraints, to actually develop the project further, to iterate and improve any solution that you're developing. The final phase is then to document the solution and the learnings from the process so that you can, of course, add that to the knowledge base of your organization, or potentially if you're working with academics, they might try and publish an academic paper. And that then, of course, establishes a baseline for future research projects taking the design science approach to draw on your experiences out of your project. So design science research is really one of the most attractive approaches to doing research, where both academe and managers, practitioners are collaborating to solve especially complex problems. Because of that, it's also extremely attractive for students completing doctorates of business administration, because it's very easy for them to find their way into this way of thinking about doing academically sound research. Well, I just thought I'd share that with you to give you an insight into design science research. I hope that that was helpful for you, and that potentially, if you're seeking to align academic knowledge and business practice to solve problems, gives you an idea of where you might go to find more information.